shall we say it from a marketing perspective, the newest member of the Dynamics 365 family, although it has been around for quite a while under various different names. Let's take a look at what Dynamics 365 Customer Voice is, how you can get it, who is eligible to get it, how it works, and what you can do with it, and as well, how does it work together with all of the other Dynamics 365 applications in the family. Dynamics 365 Customer Voice, or just to keep it brief, I'll just call it Customer Voice, is a replacement, a full replacement for Forms Pro. Forms Pro is an offering that you previously may have used already. If you have been using Forms Pro, you will automatically be migrated to Customer Voice if you haven't been migrated already. As far as I can tell, almost all customers have already been migrated by now. Could be that one or two customers are still missing, but they will be migrated eventually and automatically. Nothing you have to do there. Forms Pro was, of course, already the alternative or the replacement for Voice of the Customer, an older product from the Dynamics 365 family that allows you to send surveys to your customers after a customer service process or as a part of just a regular survey process, for example. Customer Voice, sorry, I'll get those mixed up all the time because they are so similarly named. Customer Voice is an indirect replacement for Voice of the Customer, but the correct migration path was migrating from Voice of the Customer to Forms Pro first, and then you will be migrated to Customer Voice automatically. If you still have a customer, or if your organization is still on Voice of the Customer today, that migration is now completely up to you to do manually. You will not be upgraded automatically from Voice of the Customer to Forms Pro or Customer Voice. Voice of the Customer has been deprecated a couple of years back, has been announced quite ahead of time, and during the summer period of this year, it was definitely everything was switched off, so no new surveys could be sent out. At which point, everyone was already encouraged to switch to Forms Pro if they hadn't done so already. Now, only Voice of the Customer remains. So how is Customer Voice licensed? Well, it's included with Dynamics 365. If you or your customer has Dynamics 365, it is very likely that you will already have Customer Voice. It's included with a Dynamics 365 subscription, a full subscription of Dynamics 365, which will then include a maximum of 2,000 surveys that you can, or 2,000 survey responses that you can then receive per tenant per month. So that's per whole organization per month. It's not licensed on a user basis. The qualifying licenses are all of the traditional customer engagement or CRM licenses, as well as the new licenses that have a Dynamics 365 workload that sits on the common data service. So that's Sales Enterprise, Customer Service Enterprise, Field Service Marketing, Human Resources, which is traditionally an AX workload, but it has been migrated to the common data service for a great part. So it is now also part of this family and product service automation. As far as if it is also included with the new project operations, I'm not sure. It doesn't explicitly mention that in any of the licensing documentation. We will have to see when that becomes the go-to project solution. If you do run out of those surveys, you have that maximum of 2,000 replies per month. You can buy an additional bundle for $100 a month. Of course, if you buy that in a different currency, your mileage will vary. It will be a slightly different price. And of course, if you buy it through QBS, it will be slightly cheaper even still. For those who do not have Dynamics 365, or you are on a Dynamics 365 workload, but not a qualifying one. For example, you have a customer that is on Dynamics 365 Sales Professional. You might have to purchase Customer Voice separately if you want to use it, of course. That add-on can be purchased separately, regardless of what other Microsoft product you are already using, as long as you are using something on the Microsoft 365 cloud. You can purchase that add-on for $100 a month, which will then get you the same capacity of 2,000 survey responses per month. There's no actual cap on the amount of surveys you can send out, So as long as you do not exceed that 2,000 responses per month. Assuming that you have customer voice at some point, it won't automatically appear alongside of all of the other Dynamics 365 apps in the app switcher and in the app launchers. But to open, you can just go to its URL directly. I'm sure that at some point an icon will appear in the app launcher or in the app switcher, but for now, you will have to deal with it just being customervoice.microsoft.com. You can go there and then you can see whether or not you have it already. If you open it up and you don't have it, you'll get an error message saying that you will need to purchase a license. But if you do have it already, just sign in with your work account and you will be good to go. Customer voice consists of surveys, but surveys have a little higher level, and that's projects. A survey project essentially is a container where you can have multiple surveys inside, and that can be of multiple different templates. Now, the project itself is more of a container and doesn't necessarily have to adhere to that template, but it is nice to keep things that are sort of related to put them all together in one project. There's a few templates that come right out of the box with customer voice. You have periodic customer feedback, which is essentially a feedback loop where you get in touch with your customer every month or every 2 months or something like that. How's it going? Is there anything we can improve? That sort of thing. You have an order delivery, a service visit, and a support survey, which are all roughly the same, but essentially start at a different point in your process. Order delivery being an order has been shipped out and or delivered. How was it? How was your experience with shipping? How was your experience with delivery? Did we ship the right product? Service visit being, well, you recently had a service visit from one of our field agents. How was that experience? Did the field agent live up to your expectations? Did we take care of all of the jobs? And the support survey being, you recently engaged with our customer service department. Did they solve your problem? How satisfied are you, etc. That last one will be familiar with anyone who's ever created a ticket with Microsoft. You always get that lovely survey at the end where you get to sort of judge whoever helped you, that poor Microsoft engineer who's done their best to help you out. You will be able to judge them for that. But we have all of those capabilities for ourselves as well. Let's take a look at the actual software. So I've opened it up here, customervoice.microsoft.com. I'll zoom in a little bit further so we can all read along. On your dashboard, you will have a quick glance at all of the different surveys that are in your system and how the responses are going. So far we have a 5 out of 5 customer satisfaction, which is great. And we have only positive results. But then again, there's only one option counted. So everything is going well so far. We can only go downhill from here, essentially. We can create a new project over here, or we have all of our projects here, and I can dive into any of my existing projects. But let's take a look at creating a new project. It'll ask me what kind of a project I need. So we have that periodic customer feedback, for example, that order delivery, a service visit, that support, but we can always start with a blank survey. Then you just create the survey completely from scratch, add your own questions in there, and determine exactly what you need by yourself. Let's start with a support, because that's the one we'll most likely all be quite familiar with. As soon as I start with that, I'll click on next. Then it'll ask me which location I want to put that in. Customer voice lives completely inside of the common data service, just like many other Dynamics 365 workloads are already living, and more Dynamics 365 workloads are coming into the common data service. Eventually, everything under the Dynamics 365 umbrella will hopefully live in the common data service. So you really have that common data service where all of your data is stored. Well, today for a lot of Dynamics products like sales, customer service, field service, etc., that's already the case. Now with this latest product, customer voice, that is also the case, all stored in the same environment, in that same database, the common data service. So here I can see my common data service environments. I can click on all environments and I can see all of them. In this particular demo instance, I don't really have a lot of environments, but here you can see that you have the ability to select between them. I'll go ahead and click on create to create my survey. And here we have a pre-populated survey. This pre-populated survey is completely based on the template, but we can still modify it. Here we can see a section. So we have a nice title. We can edit that title by clicking on any of these elements. You can just edit what it is. So we can even add an image here, a description. Please let us know your feedback. Something like that. And then we can scroll down to all of the different sections. So we have one section here, which has several questions in it. And for each of these questions, we can change the settings for the answers, etc. This is just a piece of text. Here we have a question, an amount of stars. We can change that text. We can change whether or not that's stars or numbers or smiley faces, for example, and also how many levels we need. For stars, we can, or for smiley faces, we can sort of bring that up or down a little bit. And we can also make things like this required or not required, meaning that they will be able to skip it or not skip it. There's a whole bunch of other question types in here, and there is quite a few of those for us to choose from. From our questions, we have the choice of these types. We have multiple choice, which is just a multiple choice, like the one you see here, longer than expected, as expected, or shorter than expected. A piece of text, which is just a free text box that people can fill out anything. The rating, which is thumbs or stars or smileys or anything like that. A date picker, a ranking, a matrix rating, and also a score. These last two have a nice creative name as well. The matrix rating is called a Likert, according to Microsoft, and this score one is called a Net Promoter Score. Both of them have a little bit of an underlying reason due to the delivery partners of this functionality. But let's not be distracted by that. Here, for example, we see the matrix, which we can add as well. Here's one that's already been completely set up. We can add a new one in here too. So we click on add a new one. You can see all of those different options here. So the Likert, as it's called here, is just one of those matrices. So you have option 1, option 2. You can say so strongly disagree, strongly agree, etc., etc. It's completely up to you. You can see that it's automatically like, hey, do you want to use this template? Yeah, probably. So I'll say disagree. And for this one, that would be agree. No, that would be neutral, strongly agree, etc. You can just fill this out relatively rapidly. We can move the questions around as well. If they have some kind of combination that you need, some kind of order that you need, you can put them in a particular order, but you can also have them randomized. When you're done with this survey, you can configure several more options. We have at the last section here, we have a thank you message, which you can customize to, which will result in a customized page where the customer will go as soon as the message or as soon as the survey is completed. And we have a little footer. You can add that footer for anyone. So maybe you want to put your email address or your privacy statement in there or something like that. Some additional configuration can be found on the right-hand side here. We can open up this menu, and here we can configure things like branching. So for example, we can create a custom branch. So if, let's say, the question, how would you rate our customers, is equal to or greater than, let's say it's less than 3, we can ask them a follow-up question instead of asking that question to everyone. So if that is true, we want to ask them, we want to show a question, and maybe we want to show this question. And otherwise, we want to hide that question. So then we can just skip it. So we can hide the question, products, knowledge, and expertise, and competence. We can just hide that. So we can essentially skip that question. Or we can also just forward to a particular question with a navigate to, then we can just skip over a whole bunch of questions and go to that particular question. Also in here are variables. We can already see a variable sitting over here, first name. That is a variable that's predefined according to this template. You can define your own variables as well and use them wherever you need. We open up the variables. We'll see that there's a few variables already in here: first name, last name, locale, which is just the language that people use, and company name in this case. There's also some default values in here. You don't have to use that if you don't want. We can add another variable in here. Let's say we also want to identify a particular type of color. So let's type in the word color here, and then the default color is green, for example. Or we could provide that a little later on. So let's make sure I click on save before I close that. So then we can add that somewhere in our survey, and when we send out this survey, we can pre-populate those variables. We can add multiple languages here, so we can send out the survey once to a whole bunch of people, and then they can just see it in whatever language they prefer. We can upload those languages with an Excel template, whereby we download essentially the language, the template. You just open that up in Excel, which of course it's oh, it has downloaded something, but it's downloaded an empty Excel sheet. That's all right. I'm afraid I can't show you that. That doesn't work at all now. But essentially, you download the language sheet, and then you upload the new one. So let's say you want to include French. Well, I was hoping for, French, just actual French. There we go. Let's try it now. Maybe it's just being silly because it didn't have anything in there. Yeah, there we go. So that was my bad. I should have selected a language first. And this will look very familiar to you. If you've ever translated a Dynamics 365 solution, it's essentially the same. We have all of the questions here and all of the answer topics. Then you can just enter in the same texts in French and re-upload that back into the system, and then everything will be available in English and French. We can also apply some branding, where we can apply a theme color, determine a specific font, and determine a specific background if you want. Back in the days of Forms Pro, there were some pre-selecting backgrounds, some backgrounds you could actually choose from, but that has apparently disappeared. So now you will have to provide your own background. Otherwise, it just defaults to a white background, which is usually fine. For formatting, we can show a progress bar and the number of the questions, so question 1, question 2, or if the order of your questions is not relevant, you can shuffle them as well. That can be useful if you're creating a survey which is more akin to maybe some kind of a quiz or a test for people to take. Now, that could be nice if you shuffle the questions, so it's not as predictable as it is. Of course, if you use the shuffle option, then the things like branching will break, because you won't be able to branch off into certain directions, so you won't be able to use that. Right now, I can't turn it on because I did configure some of those branches. That's essentially it. For the satisfaction metrics, we can pick a particular type of metric. So how do we rate in this particular survey the actual satisfaction? So we can do that with this question, for example. We can indicate that the sentiment based on another question. We have those questions in there. So question number 5 is the sentiment. And we have question number 1 is the satisfaction, and we can see that as well here. Question number 5, we will test for sentiment. So this uses a little bit of Azure artificial intelligence as well. If you type something negative in here, it will test that sentiment to be negative or positive, of course. And then we have question number 1 for the satisfaction. Well, that's just a rating. So that one's fairly straightforward. Let me change that back to stars, so it makes more sense. Because of course, if you change it to number, it could be either or. 1 could be a high rating or 5 could be a high rating. But as you can see here, you can actually configure that. But stars usually make sense to people. I say usually, but you should never assume. Right, let's assume you have set everything up. Then you are ready to send the survey. When you send the survey, you have a few options. You can send it through Power Automate. You can send it directly as an email, or you can embed it in a website or in an app. When we go back to the application, we have it here on the second tab, the Send tab. This is where we can start sending everything out. If you ever want to see a preview of the survey first, there's always a little preview button just in the top here, which you can click, and then we can just see the survey, what it would look like. We can also preview the other languages. So if I go to French, nothing happens because I haven't translated it, but we can see all of those differences. So we can also see how that works, the stars. So we can just do this, this, this. We can essentially try out the entire survey and also preview the thank you message. We can see what it looks like on our phones as well, because the entire application is also responsive. We can see this on our phones as well. So if you receive a survey in an email and you open it up on your phone, it looks pretty good as well. Now that we are ready, we can send it. We could choose email to quickly send it out to a bunch of people. By doing that, we will draft an email here. There's a little template in here as well that gives you the name of the survey and a big button to start the survey. And you can customize this as well, of course, to type in more things. And then enter the recipients that you want to include in this survey. You can enter those emails manually. So if I just type in my email address, that works just fine. And it should try to, there we go, suggest people from your address book and from your dynamic system. But you can always upload contacts as well via a CSV template. The CSV template you can download. And if I just open that up, it's just a very simple template, just name, email address, and first name, last name. It's a CSV, so it does not necessarily distribute into columns nice and neatly here in Excel, but you can enter it like that. Those contacts will be imported into the common data service because everything runs on the common data service here. So do be aware of that. Over here, we can include a little more personality as well. On the personalized, we can say first name, last name, and all of those other variables that we have. So we can say, hello, first name, please fill out our survey. And we can even add a little bit more dynamic elements. So that link, if you accidentally throw away that button, for example, here is the survey link for you to include. But what we can also do is embed survey question, which will embed the first question. And as soon as someone answers the first question through their email, they will then automatically go into the survey for the rest of that. Which, as I'm told in a previous session where we also discussed this, gets much more engagement. So that was a great tip for to be included, that first question. Right, but let's say you want to reuse this survey all the time, not use it only as a one-off. Sending an email like this is, of course, great as a one-off. But we can also use this as part of automation. So if we click on automation, we will get some survey templates, or well, not survey templates, we'll get some Power Automate templates where we can automatically start sending out surveys. Now here, it doesn't really know what template you used. So it just gives you a whole bunch of suggestions, like when a case is resolved, or when you click a button in Power Apps, or when an order is fulfilled, or when a survey or send one to a lead, or anything like that. That's completely up to you, of course, which one you can use. You can also just do this completely manually in Power Automate. That's up to you. I can use this one, for example. It'll show me that Power Automate template, and we'll go ahead and click on Continue to create that flow. I'll select my common data service environment, of course, click on Create. And now it has been created. That flow has been created. It will now automatically start sending out those surveys. We don't have to do anything because Power Automate just runs in the background. If we wanted to check that, well, we could just go to Power Automate. So let's go to the Power Automate website. And over here under my flows, let me make sure I'm in the correct environment, which is always the number one thing to check. Make sure you're in the right environment. And there we have it. Here we have our flows, the one that I created 44 seconds ago, essentially. Let me get rid of this annoying bubble here. This one is the one we created 44 seconds ago. We can just open that up and see what happens. Well, I should not have accepted cookies because then I refreshed the page. We have that trigger that we should all be familiar with when a record is updated. On the cases, in this case, when a case is resolved, so it checks that condition. It's pre-populated all of this, so when the condition status region is number 5, which is the resolved status, then it will automatically start sending out emails. Here it will check whether or not the case in Dynamics 365 is attached to a contact or to an account, because then it will send it either to the contact or to the account. And then it will retrieve that record, the contact in this case, and then it will send out that record. And we can see here, it sends it to this email address. It uses this project. It uses this survey. And then it uses this template. And it uses these variables. So first name, last name, locale, company name, and color. It's all in here. So if we have that color preference stored in our common data service, we can send it as well. Of course, you can do this completely yourself as well. Here we have that weird distinction that if it's a contact, it will send it to the contact, and if it's an account, it will send it to the account. But from what I understand of how most organizations work is that if you have a ticket and it's assigned to an account, it will still have a contact. So you would want to send it to the contact anyway. So you might have to adjust this standard Power Automate template, but that's what it is. It's always just a template. You take it from there. You take it to that next level to make sure it matches your process or your customer's process. One quick thing to call out here is these two fields, regarding and recipient details. You'll notice here it has the name of an entity and then a comma and then a placeholder. This is how the records are reconnected back in the common data service to the appropriate records. So for regarding, if you remember your activities in Dynamics 365 or your attachments or anything like that, there's always a field called regarding object, which links it back to the relevant object. That's this field here. And here the notation is slightly different from what you're used to with other connectors. Here it's incident, the name of the entity, comma, and then the ID of the record. And for recipient details, it's the same, the name of the entity, comma, and then the name of the identity or the identity. In the meantime, some questions have appeared. So let me take a moment to address those. First question from Roland. If you place a form on a website, can you automatically create a record in CRM? Yes. So yes, when you place a form on a website, the record will automatically be created for the answer of the survey, and then you can automatically have a lead created for that as well. We'll look at how records end up in the common data service in a moment. Then another question from Neil. If you have a pre-existing data set in Excel, for example, how do you import survey responses into a newly created survey? The short answer is you don't. That is something that is unfortunately not supported right now. How do you complete the survey on behalf of a customer in the scenario where a teleagent would call the customer and complete on behalf? If you send a survey invitation to a customer, there a unique link will appear, and anyone can click on that unique link, including someone on your customer service desk. As long as they click on that unique link, then the answers will be tied to the appropriate response. And then I missed a question from Sander a little bit earlier. There's also an app called Forms. What is the difference between Forms, Forms Pro, and Customer Voice? That is also a good question. That still exists. Microsoft Forms still exists as a product. Let me ignore that for a moment. But that is a freemium product which ships with Office 365. These questions are essentially, the functionality is relatively the same. You can create a form. You can see the editor is also very similar. But none of this is stored in the common data service. This is all stored inside of this application itself. And if you wanted to export that, the only way you can do that is with Excel. There's no other integration capability here. If you want to integrate with Dynamics and have things stored in the common data service, you should use customer voice, which is, if you are a Dynamics 365 customer, free to use. It's included. So there's not really any reason you shouldn't be using customer voice over forms. If you're just on Office 365 and you have no intention of going to Dynamics 365, of course, you can still use Microsoft Forms. A question from Marco. If you upload the contacts, are they visible? They are visible in the CDS. How does this affect Dynamics 365? Are these contacts visible in Dynamics? Yes, those customers or those contacts would be visible in Dynamics if that is the same environment. So when we created our survey, we selected an environment, just like we do in Power Automate. We select an environment, just like in Dynamics 365. We're always working in a particular environment. If you create the survey in the same environment as Dynamics 365, then those contacts will end up in that same environment, and therefore they are available in Dynamics 365 as well. A question from Sander, whether or not there's integration with Dynamics 365 marketing, and can I tell you how they are integrated? They are integrated because essentially they are part of the same product. Customer voice runs on top of the common data service. Everything you do is in the common data service. Dynamics 365 marketing also runs on the common data service. So as long as you create your surveys in the same environment as your Dynamics 365 marketing environment, you can target marketing customers, marketing contacts, and work in conjunction with all of your Dynamics 365 marketing things. That seems to have reached the end of the question. So let's take a quick look at what happens when we actually complete a survey. So we've set all of this up. Let's go over to Dynamics 365. This is the same environment I'm working in. And here I have a case. This case is currently assigned to me. So something happens, I have a back and forth, and eventually the case is resolved. So I'll resolve this case. And I'll say problem solved. Yep, problem is solved. Go ahead and click on resolve. And then over on Power Automate, if we're fast about that, we can probably see that trigger automatically. That should take a moment sometimes. Is it resolved yet? It is. Right, let's go back. Of course, when you're waiting on it, it always takes way too long. Let me, in the meantime, also keep an eye on my inbox on the other screen so we can take a look at that. There it is. It succeeded. So let's open that up to see what happened. So that record was updated. Indeed, it was resolved. So this was true. So it's followed over here. This was false because it's not an account as a contact. So we went over here. It retrieved my details from the common data service. So my email address, my name, etc. And then we pre-populated that survey information. This is my email address. This is the survey. We pre-populated my name in there as well. And of course, my favorite color, just in case that would exist. So now arrived in my inbox is this email. Let me make that a little bit easier to see. So we have here this email. Dear Michel van den Brink, that's the template that we've selected to use. Thank you for being a valued customer, etc. And we have a nice begin survey button, which I can click. So I'll just copy this and paste it back in my browser because I do want to have that in the same session. So I'll paste it in here. We can see that this is a relatively short link, but it is unique. This unique number identifies me, the contact. So any answers I give will automatically be linked to my contact record and also to my case in the common data service. So here we have that. And over here it says, hi, Michel, because that is that placeholder. I can say that I'm, well, just for kicks, let's say I'm not satisfied. So we can see that meter go down a little bit. Let's say it took quite a bit longer than expected. Let's say, well, the timeliness was not that great, still quite courteous, still quite a lot of knowledge, and we were not really able to, problem was resolved, but it took way more time than I expected. Over not very great. Or as expected. Of course, this is your typical customer response. It's never fast enough. We are trying our best. But that's a bit of a sidestep. We can see the answers in here as well. So if I go over back to the send tab, we can see now that there was one invite in total. The responses should take a moment to show up. So if I switch back and forth there a little bit, there it is. We have one response as well. We can also see if someone has opened it, that means they started the questionnaire, but they haven't quite finished it yet. But we do have everything is sorted here. We can see a little bit of statistics here, but the power, of course, is in the Power Platform. Everything is part of the common data service. So now on this case, if I refresh my timeline, I can see all of that as well. So I can see the questionnaire being sent, and I can also open it. There it is, the questionnaire, when it was sent, and I can scroll down and I can see the actual answers. So I can see here, there's only 1 star, there's longer than expected. I can see all of those things here, and they are also stored in structured data. So this is just a nice preview, but here we have it as well. We have a record for every question and for every answer. So we can see here that for this question, it was a 1. For this one, it was longer than expected, neutral, neutral. We can see all of those records here in the common data service. And they are linked to my contact record and to the survey, of course, but also to my case. So they're connected to all of those things. So everything comes together. So you can report on it and you can act on it. The unique link is here as well. So you can reuse that if you want. The original invite, we can see that as well. So we can drill down into that unique invite. So we can see when that was sent. We can see it was sent by a flow. We can see that it was responded to. And we can also see that short link here. So if you do have the scenario where, as a customer service representative, you want to go through the survey together with your customer, you can just open this link directly from here. And then you take them through the questionnaire, essentially. And then it will be tied back to the same record. So everything is stored in the common data service. The projects are stored as customer voice project. The surveys are stored as customer voice surveys. Underneath the customer voice surveys, we have an entity called customer voice survey question, where you will find all of the questions. There is a separate entity for all of the invitations, customer voice invitation, where you can see all of those invitations. And then underneath everything, we have customer voice responses. For every time someone answers a survey, you have a record for that. And underneath that, again, you have for every question, for every response, you have the exact answer. Here, in between those round brackets, is the logical name of that entity. Should you be keen to building a Power BI report or something in Power Automate, those will be the names you need. But everything is quite straightforward if you take a look at it. By default, it doesn't show up in your sitemap of any app. So what I've done for this particular demonstration, I've created an area here that I call customer voice, and I've included some of those entities in my sitemap. You can do that for your customers as well, of course. Those entities are just in the common data service. So if we open up Advanced Find, we will be able to see those if Advanced Find loads, of course, because that is notoriously slow nowadays. Okay, let's not wait for that. We'll come back for that in a little bit. If you are starting reporting in Power BI, there is a content pack. That content pack is still called Forms Pro. This is one of those areas where Microsoft just hasn't gotten around to renaming something yet. You can use this content pack to get a head start on reporting. There's a dashboard included with some nice report pages that you can see here. You can just get started with that in Power BI, or of course you can connect to those entities directly in the common data service and report to them right there. Those entities, one thing I forgot to mention, the actual entity records are all read-only here. This is just the reporting part. So all of the answers are stored here. So we have the responses. We can see all of those responses here. They're all stored here, but you should not modify anything here. If you do that, it's not actually updated in customer voice because there is a copy of everything stored over in the customer voice service as well. This is purely for your reporting purposes. This is a different survey that I answered previously, hence the different answers. But here you can see everything is essentially read-only. This is just purely for you to create a report. Another question in the chat. Can I explain once again if I had to reuse the survey URL and complete the survey anonymously? All right, if you want to do it anonymously, that's a completely separate thing. It's good that you have a follow-up on that, Neil. These links that it generates through a flow or through an email. So if you have a survey and you send it through an email or through Automate, those will all be unique and they tie back together specifically to a customer. So you will always be able to trace it to a customer, to a specific case, or to something specific. If you want to do something anonymously, you can do that as well. But for that, you should send it just as a link, and then you have an anonymous link that you can use to send. Or you can use the embed option, and then you have an embed option. So you can paste it inside of a website, for example. And then, of course, you just have an anonymous form as well that people can just fill out. We have an example of that on the Minds United website. We use that as well. If someone wants to start a trial of Cloud Partner Panel, for example, we have a form here. This is also a customer voice form. It's not elegant to embed this on a website. Hence, I put this little thing at the side of it just in case someone doesn't like the form. But this is also a customer voice form, just like this. It's anonymous essentially, but I do ask people about their names here. Of course, you don't have to include that. You can make it as anonymous as you want, and then it just doesn't link back to anything. The answers are still stored in the common data service, but not linked to any particular contact. Another fun option for that would be the QR code, which just gives you a nice QR code. So if any of you scan that now with your phones, you will be able to answer my survey. So I'll leave that up for a second. Another question, let's see, a question from Roland. I assume you could extend those specific entities if you wanted to add attributes to enhance data capture. Yes, that is correct. Those are just standard common data service entities, custom entities from the perspective of any solution, because it's an additional solution that gets installed. And yes, you can just extend those entities with what you want. We've done that as well internally. After you attend one of our Power Platform bootcamps, for example, we use customer voice to send out surveys, and we've extended those entities to have more information on when the last invitation was sent. So it already tracks what the invitation was sent, but we also keep track of when reminders are being sent, because customer voice doesn't come out of the box with a reminder functionality. So we've created some extra fields here to say when the first reminder was sent, when the second reminder was sent, and then we've set up Power Automate to once in a while loop through all of the unanswered surveys, and then we'll send out reminders to people. And you can just do that here in the Common Data Service. That's always the power of the Common Data Service. It's a common set of entities that gives you great functionality out of the box, but you can extend it to whatever you need for your particular process. Well, with that, we have reached pretty much the end of our time slot, but thankfully I'm also out of material. So if there's any other additional questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those, of course. If not, I would like to thank everyone for your time and attention.